All right, so now I will present to you on Oedipus the King. So most of the time, whenever I give you guys an introduction, I do all this stuff, but most of the time I'll just kind of do it right off the top of my head rather than in an organized presentation format. I'm the type of teacher that I thrive on chaos. So most of the time I know what I'm doing, but I don't necessarily write it all down. I just thrive on chaos. I see Savannah, and you're like, I could never do that, right? Yeah, my wife is a teacher, and she says the same thing. Like, I don't know how you do that. That's just the kind of mind I have, I guess. I thrive on chaos. Um, but yeah, most of the time, whenever we come to class, I don't even have any notes. I'm just ready to go, really. But this week I am very organized, so I will be presenting to you on Oedipus. So there's lots of good stuff to talk about with Oedipus. There's lots of background information to know. So I feel like I squeezed it all into 8 solid slides. So let's take a look. I didn't put it in a fancy format. I probably should have. It's just a white background. That's kind of boring. So forgive me on that. But our presentation this week is on Sophocles' tragedy, Oedipus the King. Whenever we talk about Antigone in a moment, that'll be the thriving on chaos teaching model, right? But right now it's the structured teaching model. So the first thing we need to do is discuss Sophocles as our playwright. Sophocles. So Sophocles wrote his plays from about 468 BC to around 406 BC. It's said that he lived like 90 some years. He started writing plays in his 30s, and he wrote for over 60 years pretty regularly. That's a great lifespan for somebody in the ancient period. This area, this time period that we're studying is known as the Golden Age of ancient Greece. So last week we talked a lot about ancient Greece. We talked about mythology. We talked about misogyny in ancient Greece, like it wasn't the best place to be a woman. We talked about all that kind of stuff. We didn't really talk much. We talked about philosophy even some, right? Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the 3 great Greek philosophers. But this time period, this century was known for being the golden age of the Greek theater. So Sophocles was kind of the second generation of these playwrights. Savannah next week will be presenting on Aeschylus. Aeschylus is like one of the first playwrights. So like next week, when you read Agamemnon, some of you guys might think I think some of you guys will think it's less good than Oedipus or Antigone. Well, Sophocles innovated a lot off of Aeschylus. I wanted to give Sophocles first, mostly to kind of hook you in, right? Everybody enjoys Sophocles. You might not have thought you were enjoying it when you were reading it, but I guarantee you got something out of it. Aeschylus is a little harder. So we're also reading Euripides' Medea next week, and that play always gets people going. But this is the golden period of the theater. So just to give you guys a little bit of context about that, the theater became one of the prominent forms of entertainment in ancient Athens. So whenever you talk about ancient Greece, right, Athens and Sparta are the 2 biggest city-states. theater became a big thing in Greece. And you probably noticed here that some things are a lot different. Like when you were reading Oedipus, you might have noticed, for instance, you have a character called the chorus. The chorus is supposed to kind of represent all the people of Greece. So anytime the chorus talks to Oedipus or Cleon and Antigone or anybody like that, they're supposed to represent all the people of Greece. That's something you don't really see in theater anymore. This was kind of an ancient way of kind of condense a lot of characters into one character. So if you see the role of the chorus, for instance, that's an innovation from the ancient Greeks that we've kind of moved away from. But theater was big. The Greeks invented tragedy. They also invented comedy. And we have a much greater understanding of Greek tragedy than comedy for reasons I will discuss in the next slide. But you guys can kind of see how the Greeks, based on our discussion last week, you guys can probably see how the Greeks would thrive writing tragedies. The mythology of the Greeks, as I discussed last week, very bleak. It's not the most hopeful place to be as far as your role within the larger cosmos. So this play especially is a lot of it is the fault of the gods. But what is Sophocles known for? I guess that was a lot of background information. But what is Sophocles mostly known for? His intense characterizations. So next week when you read Agamemnon, I think you guys will find the characters aren't as well developed as this. That's because that was one of Sophocles' great innovations, making really rich, rounded characters that aren't flat characters. These are round characters. These are characters with a lot of emotional depth. Like, he's one of the first playwrights to write characters this good. Before Sophocles, you didn't have more than 2 actors in a scene at any given point. So Sophocles put 3 actors on stage at once. Before this, there was only 2. Now today, when you think to yourself, only 3 actors on stage, right? You can have some plays you see 20 or 30 on stage at once. Well, again, the Greeks invented the wheel, right? We've refined the wheel since then. But what are some of his other famous plays? Well, you guys read another one, Antigone, the Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and Electra. So he wrote several plays about Oedipus and his family. This play and Oedipus at Colonus tell almost the same story, but they tell it way differently. So this is the play that's most often talked about in these types of classes, though. A couple of you guys are taking world literature with me too, Western world literature. We're discussing this play in that class too. This is just one of those plays that gets talked about a lot in English classes or theater classes. That's what the guy looked like. He had a pretty epic beard. That's a beard to strive for right there. Sophocles won, I should have mentioned here, Sophocles won a lot of awards. The Greeks actually had they kind of invented like the award ceremonies for these types of for plays. Every year, Sophocles would win most of the awards. Euripides and couple of those other playwrights, they were a little more edgy. Sophocles' plays were kind of accepted by most of the people. Euripides was a little too edgy for a lot of the Greeks. Aristophanes was seen as too vulgar for a lot of the Greeks. So Sophocles kind of strikes that nice middle ground where he's not that controversial. So oftentimes he would win awards because of it. But next slide. So Aristotle was very important to understanding this play. I think I told you guys before, Aristotle innovated most of the forms of knowledge we have today. So in English class, he invented rhetoric. In this class, he invented what's called the Poetics, his book, The Poetics, where he discusses a lot of these ideas. You guys take a look at our text. I don't think I asked you to read it, but if you look at our text, his ideas about the Poetics are in here, starting on page 220. This is something that you guys can look at on your own time, but this is where he kind of really defines the theater. So like, what makes a play a tragedy? That's kind of the biggest thing that Aristotle asks. What makes a play a tragedy? So he has lots of key terms. One of these terms is catharsis. A catharsis is a moment in a play where there's like an outpouring of emotions. So like that's think about a conflict in a play, right? Or even a novel or something like a TV show or something like that. Usually when it comes to plot, there's this sort of rising action, right? The plot, so think about it like you're going up a hill. Like the plot just keeps going up and up and up. Eventually, you'll come to the top of the hill, and that becomes the climax of the play. And then after that, that's when everything starts going back downhill again until you close out. The catharsis is that moment, especially where the play really hits hard. In a tragedy, there should be a moment where, like, maybe you cry, right? Maybe you're over here trying not to. There should be some moment that sort of really kicks you in the stomach to make you feel pity or sorrow for whatever is going on. Well, we can definitely identify what that moment is in Oedipus, like when he discovers the awful secret and tears out his eyes. Right? That's the moment of catharsis. But Aristotle has the term recognition and reversal. So oftentimes these tragedies don't come about because of the character. Usually in a Aristotle says in a tragedy has to happen to a good person. If you're a bad person, you can't really have a tragedy, like, because nobody's going to feel sorry for you. Aristotle argued you have to be kind of inherently heroic to be a character in a tragedy. The term recognition comes when a character is being manipulated by forces outside of his control, his or her control. And there's always a moment in a Sophocles play where you can kind of see something clicked for this character, like, oh gosh, right, I'm the cause of the plague in the land. So there's a definite moment in Oedipus we can point to. That's the recognition. Usually after the recognition, there's a reversal. So after the character realizes what he or she has done, that's when things start to take a big sharp turn for the worse. We can definitely point to those moments in both these plays. This one, when Oedipus realizes what he's done, and in Antigone, that comes when Cleon's being too stubborn to save Antigone. And then what happens after that? It's almost like a Tarantino movie, right? Everybody starts dying of suicide. So there's definitely a moment of reversal. Normally, I would stop and ask you guys a question here, but I'm going to keep moving on just for the sake of showing you how to do a presentation. So, brief summary. What happens in the play? A curse has fallen over Thebes. Oedipus, who became king of Thebes after saving it from the Sphinx, tries to understand why the god Apollo has cursed the land. Oedipus discovers that he accidentally fulfilled a prophecy told at his birth that he would marry his mother and murder his father. Despite having tried his whole life to avoid that prophecy, Oedipus accidentally fills it as he was left to die at birth, having been rescued by a shepherd. In shame, Oedipus blots out his own eyes and is then banished from the land. So basically, I felt like that was a cogent summary of what happened, right? Basically, Oedipus, it's not his fault. He tried to avoid this prophecy from the very beginning of his life, but he didn't know that who he thought was his mother and father wasn't actually his mother and father. But he left his home because he thought that he would be avoiding that prophecy. Well, come to find out, he was given up at birth by his mother. And on his way to Thebes, he kills his father. He gets into a quarrel with him and kills him in like a brawl. So he thought he just killed some random guy. It was actually his dad. And then when he gets to the kingdom, he marries his mother and has children with her. All right, pretty messed up story. Pretty messed up. At the end of the, I'll be curious to know in a few minutes what you guys felt for Oedipus in the play. How much you guys felt sorry for him, if at all. You can make the argument he brought it on himself. That's basically what happened, the gist of it all. Key themes. So this is whenever you guys do your own presentations, this is a slide to really hone in on. So themes are the main ideas of the play. These are the big questions that keep us up at night whenever we discuss the play. Now, the first one is freedom of will versus fate. This one's a good way to knock your socks off in week 2. All right, freedom of will versus fate. So what I mean by that, does Oedipus have the freedom did Oedipus do this to himself? Did he have freedom to make these decisions that led him from point A to point B? Or was Oedipus kind of a puppet on a string that the gods were kind of pulling along, right? Oedipus is a puppet. He has no freedom over his own actions because it's all dictated by fate. That's a big philosophy question, right? Do you have freedom to make your own decisions, or is it all dictated by fate? There's a long history of this debate, right? This is kind of an ancient Greek way of thinking about it. If you're talking about Christian literature, right? Certain types of Christians argue that you don't have, if you're a Calvinist, you don't have freedom. God, like even to be saved or not, right? So Calvinists argue God knows before you're born whether you're going to go to heaven or hell. So Calvinists are mostly modern day Presbyterians, right? But God knows before you're born whether you're going or not. That's a sense of fate. Other Christians argue you have freedom to make your choice. God maybe knows what you're going to do, but that doesn't mean you still don't have freedom. So that I could ramble on and on about that subject. Freedom of will versus fate. Blindness. Blindness is a theme. Oedipus puts his own eyes out at the end, right? But he also was blind that he's the cause of all the ills in the kingdom. He couldn't ever see that he was the cause. He was blind. The prophet Tiresias is blind. So Tiresias is Apollo's prophet. Like, Apollo's always causing trouble for the Greeks. But Tiresias belongs to Apollo. He's blind. So there's an irony in the play, right? The guy who's blind can see a lot better than the guy who's got eyes. So there's a bit of an irony throughout the play. And that's why Oedipus tears his eyes out at the end. The cruelty of the gods. Like, what kind of god would set somebody up to fail this hard? Right? Apollo. Right? There's your answer. Right? Apollo curses all these people just because of like the sin of this one man. And the guy didn't even realize that he had sinned. So, again, human beings are kind of the playthings of the gods. I say here the role of women in ancient Greece. So we could definitely talk about Jocasta, who was Oedipus's mommy / wife, along with Oedipus's daughters. Like, there's a whole bit at the end where Oedipus is like, "Oh God, what's going to happen to my daughters now that everybody knows they were bred from incest? Right? What nobody's going to want to marry them now." So there's a moment at the end of the play where Oedipus kind of has a little breakdown about that. So we can definitely at some point today have a discussion about that. Should prophecy be listened to? That's a theme that I sort of identified. That kind of ties in with freedom of will versus faith. And then heroism. Do you think Oedipus is heroic in any way for trying to find out what's causing the kingdom to suffer, and then kind of removing himself from the equation when he realizes he is the cause? Some people might be egotistical and might not remove themselves, right? So he kind of seems a little selfless. I didn't mention a second ago, but some background for the story. Oedipus becomes king because he solves the Sphinx's riddle. I'm gonna real quickly Google. I know the riddle. I'm gonna real quickly Google it. See if you guys can answer this riddle. This is the riddle that Oedipus solves to become king. The riddle says, what being has 4 legs, and then 2, and then 3? So the Sphinx was killing people because nobody could come up with the answer to this. What being has 4 legs, then 2, and then 3?
A man.
A man. Right? You know that one, Josh. A man. When a human being is a baby, it crawls on all 4s. Whenever we're adults, we're on 2 legs. And then when we get old, we have to use a walking cane. So we then have 3. So yeah, that is the answer to the riddle. Nobody could figure it out until Oedipus came along. it's a clever riddle, right? It's a clever one. So I want to, before we move on to key passages, I kind of want to really quickly introduce you guys to this play's significance. And the play's ultimate significance comes from Sigmund Freud's psychology. Like, so this was always a famous play throughout the millennia. But when you guys probably know, Sigmund Freud was sort of the founder of classic psychology in the 1800s, early 1900s. Especially some of you guys in here are going to be future education majors. And Freud kind of came up with the theory of early childhood development. He invented the field of early childhood development. Like, what happens in a kid's brain when a kid's an infant into a toddler? Well, today we know a lot more about brain chemistry and neuroscience. Back then, it was kind of theory and conjecture. But Freud read this play. He also read Hamlet. There's a lot of weird things going on between Hamlet and his mother whenever we get to that play. But Freud took this idea of Oedipus accidentally marrying his mother. And he argues that this applies to young boys. We'll get to the ladies in a second. But Freud says, especially for young boys, there's a sense of sexual attraction that the infant has to its mother. You guys might think to yourself, that sounds crazy, right? But Freud argues that this sort of attachment happens. And what comes from that, there's a point where the baby realizes this relationship this attraction that can't happen. This is wrong. That usually happens when the father comes into the picture, right? The kid realizes, hey, I can't be this close to mom because dad's in the picture, right? This is taboo. This is wrong. So Freud argues that that is kind of the first moment in a child's life that is traumatic. So whenever that happens, the child represses his memory. And then what happens whenever you repress your memories? Well, that's trauma, right? That's pretty much the definition of trauma. This is the first traumatic moment in a kid's life. All the behavior issues that come up after that, all the psychological issues we come up with later in life, it all goes back to when male children realized that they couldn't be that close with their mommies. The same idea works with daughters and fathers. Freud actually took that idea from Sophocles' play Electra. But for boys, it's called the Oedipus complex. For girls, it's called the Electra complex. And the Electra is pretty much flip it. The young girl child wants to be close to the father. Mother comes into the picture. She realizes she can't. And then that causes a lot of damage. Anytime that you guys might hear like this person has mommy issues, this guy's got mommy issues, like this girl's got daddy issues, this all springs from Sigmund Freud. He was the OG psychologist, you might as well say. So we'll, again, just to get through the slides, we'll talk more about that in a second. That in a nutshell is what he argues. I understand, based on talking to students before, I've heard that you guys don't really talk about Freud too much in like Psychology 201 or something these days, or even the early childhood development class. Freud's really outdated. Um, like some people say this idea is absurd, right? But whenever you repress something, that causes you to dream. So there, whenever you guys dream at night, that comes from your subconscious mind. That's stuff you've repressed throughout the day. So even Freud talked a lot about dreams. He argued dreams are our way of processing stuff that we've kind of buried into our brains during the day. A very brilliant guy, very brilliant guy. One of the great thinkers of all time to even come up with this stuff. But he came up with it from reading Sophocles, which is really interesting. So I came up with some key passages. My line numbers might be a little different. I'm using my book from world literature instead of the theater book. But I said that the kingdom's curse, that's really early in the play. That's a great passage to look at. That's where it kind of details how everybody in the kingdom is suffering and nobody can figure out what's going wrong. So that there's a lot of really vivid imagery in that passage. Pretty early on, about 380 lines in, Tiresias tells Oedipus. Tiresias kind of stops beating around the bush. Tiresias says, "You're the cause of all this." Oedipus is like, "What? How can I be the cause? I'm just trying to do what's right." He's like, "You're the cause." So that almost creates this moment of reversal. Tiresias pretty much plants a seed in Oedipus. It's a seed that has to grow. He plants a seed of curiosity. Once Tiresias does that to Oedipus, Oedipus is going to find out what really happened. He's not going to stop. He becomes obsessed with the idea of knowledge. Knowledge is a theme, right? You guys all know that in religion and in mythology, in this case, oftentimes trying to get knowledge leads to dire consequences. Oedipus's thirst for what really happened, he can't just kind of live life ignorant in bliss. He has to know what happened, and that causes his downfall. Just like with Adam and Eve in the garden. Another key part I said was Oedipus discusses murdering a man on the road, not knowing it was his father. So he kind of this. Whenever you're the reader, one of the cool things about the play, you know what most of the time people know what happens to Oedipus before the play starts. So we all know what he did. So we're kind of, as the audience, we're kind of in on the secret. So whenever he discusses murdering this man, you're just sitting there thinking to yourself, "Oh man, you're talking about your father, and you just don't even know it." Right. So that's kind of a moment of recognition for the audience, if you will. Jocasta, Oedipus's wife / mother, warns him to stop trying to figure all this stuff out before it goes too far. So she kind of pieces it together before he does. Right? She's like, "Oh no, right? Yeah, I remember giving this baby to be thrown to the wolves. Oh no, the shepherd saved it." So she kind of puts two and two together before he does. When this whole mystery is going on. So she's like, "Don't." She's sitting there thinking, "Son, don't keep pushing it. Otherwise, you're gonna really hurt yourself. There's a moment in the play where Oedipus realizes what he's done. Whenever he talks to that shepherd who who saved him all those years ago, that's when he starts putting two and two together. Oh no, my parents back home were my adopted parents. He kind of has like an oh shit moment, right? Oh no, where my mind is now going here. So that's kind of the recognition part of the play. Then I say Oedipus tears out his eyes. That's a great moment of catharsis. That's when you really feel for Oedipus as the whole tragedy kind of comes down around him. And then Oedipus laments for his daughter's futures. So there's a great passage where he is wondering what's going to happen to them now that everybody knows they came from incest. One of Oedipus's daughters, Antigone, is the subject of her next play. So we know things didn't turn out too great for her either. So I have some discussion questions here. So whenever you guys do your own, we'll kind of use these questions to kind of go on, and then we'll kind of have a conversation using your discussion questions. Maybe your discussion questions will lead to other questions, but that's kind of how it works. So, is Oedipus responsible for the calamity that befalls him and his kingdom in the play? Or is it because the gods played a cruel trick on him? What do you think? Blindness is a key theme. Comment on how it's operating. What are some instances of irony that you notice in the play with regards to the audience being aware of the story beforehand, while Oedipus, the character, is unaware? Then comment on the role of women in the play. So that's lots of stuff to talk about. So whenever you guys come up with your own, you'll write these open-ended questions, kind of like this. But you guys tell me. We'll kind of turn this into more of an informal discussion now. So thriving on chaos, right? What did you guys make of this play, Oedipus the King? Did you enjoy the read? Were you disturbed by it? What was your guys' thoughts upon reading it?
I really liked it, but it was kind of like it was a little disturbing, like towards the end. And like when I first started reading it, I kind of thought that he would have done the stuff in the beginning, but it kind of shocked me a little bit the way he found out and the fact that he was adopted. So that the gouging out of his own eyes was a little disturbing to read because I was not expecting that.
If you're like me, Kira, like I'm the type of person I hate messing with my eyes. I've had to learn how to wear contacts recently, right? So just thinking about like the swishing noise it would make and all that kind of makes me a little sick.
I was reading it like out loud to one of my friends, and she was like, "Ooh, I could just imagine the noises." And I'm like, "No, I'm into like gore and stuff, but when it comes to the eyeballs, that's no, can't do that."
Yeah, I feel a little bit like Oedipus says. I've tried to learn how to wear contacts. I feel like I'm gouging my eyes out every day. I have to wear them. I don't have a choice. What about so good? What are some of the rest of you guys think about Oedipus? How'd the reading experience go?
I found it weird. Very, as you always saying, very disturbing on the end. But I will say how you was talking about will versus fate. I definitely feel like it shows in the story that no matter which way you go, fate is going to resolve. You're going to end up where you're going to end up.
Right. Yeah, there's not a lot of free will for humanity here to make their own decisions, right? And think about how much of a stretch it was that this would happen to Oedipus. He goes out of his way to avoid it. Then it happens like that. It's kind of that shows you, right? Fate is what's in control, not us.
You can plan to avoid whatever you want, or you can plan to go on a certain path, but no matter what, you're going to end up where you need to be in life, is how I put it.
Yeah, that's a good expression of the Greek mind, I would say. Again, even if we think about modern Christianity and stuff, even different types have different ideas about this. Like how much do you have freedom versus how much is ordained already by God. Interesting issue. The Greek gods, they ordained it all, right? So we're kind of like the little mice that they're stringing along. I'm gonna put it up in gallery views so I can see everybody here. Shayla, what do you think of the play?
Well, I liked how we already knew where the truth was gonna lead, but the story still managed to be suspenseful.
That's a hard task to pull off, right? How does he do that, right? I think that question I asked about irony is how, right? There's lots of stuff said in the play that's ironic. We know that that's where it's going, but it strikes us like, oh, that's ironic. So I think there's lots of interesting devices in the play. That's how he keeps the suspense going. Masterclass, right? To know what's going to happen, and then it's still being something you want to see to the end. Lily, what do you make of it?
I think I agree with everything everybody said. I think it was suspenseful. I like that. And it was disturbing too.
Right.
So I think I liked it a little better than I do the Antigone.
Yeah, I prefer Oedipus too. Antigone's got some good stuff. We'll transition over before the class is over. Faith, what about yourself? What did you make of Oedipus? Nathan?
I find Oedipus really interesting, and to make more comments about the fate versus will thing is I think it's a little mixture of both when it comes to this story, because he made the choice to kill the man. So that set in stone his fate. Because if he didn't kill his dad, that means his dad would still be with his mom, and therefore mom would be unavailable for him to marry.
Very good point. Very good point. That's a limit to how much should we feel sorry for Oedipus. Oedipus is a murderer. He kind of murdered his dad in cold blood. Even if he didn't know that was his dad, right? He still murdered a guy in cold blood. So how much should we really feel pity for the guy? You posited that argument beautifully there, Faith, right? He's a murderer, right? So how much can we feel sorry for the guy? It was kind of like a bar fight gone wrong. That's kind of like what it was. Like maybe you get a beer bottle and hit somebody over the head. and you hit them in the wrong place in the head and they kill over, right? I don't think Oedipus necessarily meant to murder him like that, but it happened. So, but nevertheless, he's a murderer. Josh, Daryl, you guys got anything to add?
I wouldn't add too much. I do agree with a lot of their points, except I would say, give me a second. I need to think about what to say. I do like the build up, how the story builds up over time. I would say that that's what drew me into this reading.
Right, so you kind of see how it all starts unraveling. Right, so that's part of the what keeps the read going.
Exactly.
Daryl, what about yourself? How did the play go for you?
I'm thinking about the same as Joshua. I don't really know what else I could really add to it, but it's definitely a very intense and gory one to start out with. I agree that it was suspenseful. We sort of knew how it was going to play out from the beginning because of the prophecy and the destiny type of theme it had, but we just wanted to know how it got to that point, how Oedipus felt about how he felt about the situation once he ended up doing it, and just what he decided to do after.
So we know the journey, right? We know what happens. So the play's brilliance is perhaps the journey to the end point. Now think about how often that happens, guys. We know what's going to happen in the story, but we're still like to see how we get there. Aristotle argued that Oedipus was a good man, right? Aristotle argued you can't have a tragedy if the character isn't good or noble in some sense. Now, this idea has been challenged a lot. Think about, I'm sure some of you guys saw the Joker movie that came out a couple of years ago with, they kind of tried to give a human side to the Joker. But that's a case of trying to humanize an evil character, right? There's a lot of, whenever you talk about different characters in movies or plays, oftentimes what makes the evil characters are usually more interesting than the good characters, right? If you think about comic books or something. And a lot of that is because maybe the character wasn't bad at first, but maybe tragic things happen that cause the character to become bad. Aristotle would completely disagree. He'd say somebody like that can't ever be the subject of tragedy. It always has to be a good guy. So kind of have to ask yourself, do you think Oedipus is a good guy? I think Faith argued a moment ago, no, right? Because of his murder. What would some of the rest of you guys answer to that? Do you think that Oedipus is a good man? Another way you can build on this question is, do you think you can have a tragic story with an evil character? Was Aristotle wrong? What do you guys make of that idea?
I feel like he could have had a better life if he would have brought himself to do better instead of murdering that man, instead of taking that route. He could have made a better life for himself.
Maybe he could have chosen to stay in his original kingdom, right? That would have not put him on that road to kill his father. Something I always like to joke about, if Oedipus had a prophecy that he would marry his mother, why did he marry an older woman? Right? Why not marry younger? Right? That's that's something that I've always joked about. Maybe he just likes them older. I don't know. It probably has to do with politics, right? To become the king, he had to marry the already established queen who was widowless. So it has to. That's the answer, right? But I always like to joke he could have married him a younger one if he wanted to avoid that prophecy.
Honestly, if I knew that my prophecy was that I was gonna marry my mother and then kill my father, I I just I wouldn't murder anybody, like ever, no matter what. Or I would just stay away from relationships. But I do feel like a lot of people that do bad things, like especially in this, that maybe they had like a rough upbringing, but that still doesn't like excuse the fact that he murdered somebody in cold blood. So I don't know, it's kind of hard to feel bad for him when he kind of brought it upon himself. Like he left where he was supposed to be and then murdered somebody in cold blood, and he was throwing out accusations to people, and it kind of like bit him in the butt, which I can't really say isn't that deserved, but
Yeah, he when Tiresias tells him he's the cause, right? He's ready to kick Tiresias out of town. His Cleon as well, right? He's trying to kick, like he tries to banish Cleon too. Maybe rightfully so, because we learn in Antigone that Cleon's a jerk. Right, but he tries to kick him out too. And you raise a great point there that
he
he's
just
kind of arrogant, right?
he when he tried to kick him out, it honestly it felt like he wasn't really listening to him. He was just kind of throwing accusations around, and when he tried to like talk, he wouldn't give him the time of day to explain anything. Which I mean, when I read the next part of it, he is a douche, but he still should have been heard out, and he wouldn't hear him out. So it's kind of his own fault, and he wouldn't listen to anybody around him. He was just throwing accusations around and saying like, you did this, you need to leave and stuff, and he wouldn't listen to anybody but himself.
He also threatens to torture the shepherd, because the shepherd's like, I'm not going to tell what happened. He actually threatens to torture him if he doesn't give up the secret. And there's another piece of evidence for you there, Kira. The shepherd who saved his life when he was a baby, right? He's going to torture him.
Even then, like if I remember right, when he found out that the shepherd was the one who saved his life, didn't he say something about killing him or banishing him or something like that? Which
Yeah,
is
that was just before when he's trying to get him to say what happened, and he's not willing to.
that's just awful. He's like, he saved your life, and now you're doing this. Like when I first read it, I felt bad for him, and then I reread it and thought about it more, and I not a shed of guilt do I feel for him, because he asked for it, and he was just, I don't know what's with these people and being douches, but I swear they all are. I also don't know what's with these people and hanging themselves. Lord.
There was a ton of that in Antigone, right? Everybody hangs themselves at the end, and it's kind of comical how many people die at the end of it. This play we have a nice catharsis, right? Antigone, it's the catharsis is everybody dies. Before we move on to Antigone, I had to pick you guys' brains about the Freud stuff. that I talked about. Freud got his idea of psychology from this play. Everybody has their opinions about this stuff, the Oedipus complex, the Electra complex. Everybody makes jokes about it, like certain people have mommy, like this guy's got mommy issues, right? He can't ever be in a relationship with a woman because his relationship with his mom's too tight. They're like, I know a guy who is one of my best friends. He's my age, he's about 35, really successful man, an attorney, but he's never been in any relationship in his life, like with a woman or with a man, right? He's never been in a relationship with anybody. So he's got a very domineering mother, right? So my friends and I have always attributed that to maybe Freud was right about a couple of things. Think about even in like horror literature, like you guys probably know the movie Psycho. Norman Bates in Psycho had his dead mother in his basement. Like he was dressing up as her and stuff. Like he had her in his mind. That's a pretty wild movie to watch if you guys have never seen it. Classic. But even with sometimes men like to joke about girls and their fathers too, right? Like especially that's not really a thing to joke about. I've never really liked to joke about that, like even in playful banter, because that's not really a thing to laugh at, right? A girl's father abandoned her at a young age, so now she might be showing some sort of abandonment issues, right? But that's oftentimes the butt of a joke too. So what do you guys think of Freud? Do you think he was right? Maybe he was right to an extent, but he took it too far. Or some of you guys think he's completely wrong, and this is really weird and messed up. Thinking about it, right? He's talking about infants, right? He says infants grow these unhealthy attachments to their parents. This question normally gets people riled up, right? Maybe it's just getting late. But are any of you guys in here parents who might be able to speak to the relationship between a parent and a child? Are any of you guys in here parents who might want to comment on this? It's food for thought, right? It's food for thought. This is something that comes up all the time, thinking about people and the relationships and what previous relationships might have caused psychologically. If I have to give my opinion here, I would say that I think he's right to an extent. It seems a little crazy to say that an infant has that much of an attachment. Like, but you can kind of see how some attachments become unhealthy. That's probably my assessment of Freud.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same way you are too. But as far as being, I don't know. I can see an infant being attached, but now when you grow older, it's just weird. But now some people think it happens sometimes. Like you say about joking and stuff. I've heard a lot of people throw jokes at people like that. So, but no, I don't think it could be possible, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not something that you're conscious of. Like, if you do have an attachment, it's not something that you're sitting there conscious of. Like, yeah, mom's hot, right? No, nobody's going to say that, but
Yeah.
it's something you bury deep down. Ford says. It's kind of hard to argue that you don't see some of that, right? You see mama boys or daddy girls, right? It's hard to argue he's not right to an extent. That's my 2 cents. Whatever those 2 cents are worth. 2 cents don't go too far these days.
I think that like she said, like when you're a newborn, you're obviously gonna be like really attached. But like I'm very close with my dad, but when you reach like a certain age, you should try to start like cut the umbilical cord by now. Like you need to start backing up some. And I don't know. I do think that a lot of people are too like I don't want to like the mindset of I don't want to date another woman or a man because of like I have my mom and dad. Like that's when it gets a little weird. Like you're you gotta you gotta fix that because that's just weird.
Yeah, it's like my friend who I was discussing, like he's probably a millionaire at this point, but he still lives with his mom. Right? So yeah, none of I see Michelle is like, what? All right. None of us can wrap our minds around it. But again, that's when things start to get a little strange. You have what's called overbearing parents, right, who are so overbearing that it's hard for the children to break away. They don't let them fly from the nest, so to speak.
I think that if like you were an adult and you wanted to like stay at home because your parents were sick or something like that, that's like completely different if you're there for your like parents' well-being. But if you're there and able to leave and you just don't want to because you have such an attachment to your parents, that is not healthy because most of the time the parents die before the child. So it's not healthy to have the mindset of, well, I always have my parents because you won't. And then one day they're not going to be here and you're not going to know what to do with yourself. And it's going to be awful. And I honestly feel like that's the attachment like that. That's kind of, it's like a toxic relationship between the two. Because I feel like with an attachment like that, it's not just one sided, that the parents have to be feeding into it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It takes two in that case. We just lost somebody. Who'd we lose? Shayla, she's back. Yeah, fascinating piece of literature. Right, we had a pretty rich discussion. So let's give rest of our time to Antigone. Okay, I didn't prepare a fancy PowerPoint for Antigone, so you guys will just have to rely on chaos for this one. But we know a lot about Sophocles now. We know like how he structures his plays just based on Oedipus. I think he wrote Antigone before Oedipus. Their textbook actually has Antigone before Oedipus. I told you guys to read Oedipus first before Antigone because structurally Oedipus happens before Antigone. Did any of you guys read it? Antigone, then Oedipus? Did any of you guys do it in that order? Or did you go Oedipus first?
I went to this first and then to Antigone.
Did you? So I wonder how your reading experience might change if you read Antigone first. But Antigone is a completely different play. Right? There's the themes of this play are extremely different. This is a play. My argument about this play, this is a play that argues about tyranny. That tyranny is at the heart of of this play. We learn that, using the wrong book. We learn that all that Antigone wants to do after Oedipus is banished, we learn that this war starts. And it's a civil war. And different people in the family take different sides. Cleon becomes king after Oedipus is banished. So Cleon didn't seem too horrible when you read Oedipus, right? He seemed like the concerned uncle. But when he becomes king, this is a case where the power kind of gets to his head, right, to say the least. So the plot summary, what happens? So basically Oedipus's son is killed in battle. He's killed in battle. But the problem is he's not on Cleon's side. He's on the opposing side. So Cleon creates this law saying you can't bury the traitors. You need to leave them out to rot and let the birds eat their flesh. Right? Let the crows have them. They don't deserve the dignity of a burial. So whenever we talk about this play, we think about our values that we hold dear. When someone dies in the Western world, right, the person gets a funeral. Usually respects are paid at the funeral. Funerals are something that are really important for us to process death. It's almost, you might even make the argument a funeral was almost a God-given right. Right? Everybody deserves a funeral. Maybe not everybody, right? Maybe if you were a serial killer or something, maybe you shouldn't get one. But for the most part, everybody is a human. That's how we process our grief. That's how the survivors process their grief. Well, Antigone, his sister, breaks the rules. She's like, that's stupid law. Cleon's clearly egotistical. A stupid law. I'm going to bury my brother. Well, Cleon takes great offense to that. So both with Antigone and her sister, Cleon pretty much orders them both to be murdered because they break the law. So it seems like a pretty heavy penalty for this particular offense. But Cleon's pretty much like, it's even kind of a brutal murder. He's like, I'm not going to say that I stuck the knife in, but I'm going to put her in a cave and roll a rock in front of the cave where she can't get out. Right? She'll starve to death in the cave. So it's kind of one of those, I'm killing her, but I'm not sticking the knife in. Right? It's kind of like, that's kind of like a cop out. Like, it's a way of making himself feel better, I guess. Cleon, people beg him, stop doing this. This is stupid. Power's getting to your head. Doesn't stop, right? He still does it. So what happens after that? As we were joking about a second ago, everybody dies. Right? Cleon's son kills himself. His wife dies. Right? Everybody around him completely dies to the point that he's left alone. He has nobody left in the world at the end of the play because of his own arrogance. So a cautionary tale of sorts. Right? Don't let your pride, don't let your ego ruin your life. But also a cautionary tale about overbearing government. Right? The play seems kind of conservative in this respect, right? Because government is clearly a source of evil here. Cleon is using government to do unjust things. So the play also asks, if your government is unjust, do you have the right to break the law? Because maybe there's a higher law than the government. Right? There's a natural God-given law. So that would be what I would argue the themes are of Antigone. Right? An unjust government, a higher law, sense of law, maybe a divine sense of law. Funerals, the importance of funerals, and our processing of grief. Then fate again, right? Fate has decreed that Cleon will be punished for all of these things. This isn't a play where you can really say tragedy happens to somebody good. And this, unless you're talking about the victims here, right? Everybody who dies, because everybody is murdered because everybody dies because Cleon's a jerk. So very different play. Some ideas are similar, but it completely asks a bunch of different questions. So where do we go from here? Let's start with your general impressions of the play. A lot of you guys said you liked Oedipus better, but Antigone is a really famous early heroine in literature. Like I talked about before, the Greeks, the women in ancient Greek literature were very underrepresented or uncharacterized. Antigone is really a interesting, well-rounded character. That could be one way we look at it. But before I ramble on anymore, what did you guys think of Antigone? Did you find it interesting?
This one really, like, I have a very strong opinion about it. It makes me really irritated because he punished this girl because she wanted to bury her brother, which, like, in life, you have your morals and you should be able to follow with your morals, like, no matter what anybody else says. It's not like she did something like terrible to like her land. She just buried her brother and then she was sentenced to be murdered for it. So I mean, it's sad that his son and his wife died, but he kind of deserved it for like to be punished because he punished a girl just because she wanted to bury a family member.
I would agree with you there, right? That's an egregious thing to say. Right? You can't bury your family member, who's also my family member, right? Out of spite, pretty much. Savannah, I saw where you were going to say something a second ago.
Yeah, I really liked it, honestly. The main thing I liked about it is the fact that even throughout the whole story, she never once backed down to Creon. Is that how you say it? Creon?
You're right.
But the fact that she never backed down even till death, because she ends up hanging herself while she's in there from her own claw. And through the whole story, all she told him was, I wanted to do my ritual to be able to basically send him to Hades so that he can rest and grieve. And he's constant, no, you won't give him that satisfaction. And she's right back at him, yes, I am, and I will do it proudly, and I will die proudly. And when he ends up locking her in that cave, she says, I won't even give him that satisfaction.
Yeah, very, very well said, right? She doesn't let him win. So she's definitely a martyr here for something greater. So here's a great instance of a martyr, early martyr. Faith, what'd you think of this one?
This one was extremely hard for me to read because already I have a difficulty with attention and reading, and this one could not get my attention at all. When I first read it, I thought Antigone and Esmene were dating, and I had to read it again to realize that they're sisters. But other than that, I agree with what has already been said by everyone else.
Right. This I agree. This one doesn't grab you at the beginning quite like Oedipus does. It takes this one a while to warm up. I guess once it does, it blows like a volcano. Right. But it takes it a while to get hot enough to do it. You know, they do kind of have a nice bickering banter where I could see where you would think that at first, that they're not sisters, that they're dating or something, right? The sisters bicker like that too, right? So maybe I don't have any sisters, so I can't say for sure. Shayla, what'd you make of it?
Creon is a turd and he got what was coming to him. It sucks that everybody else had to die because he was a turd, but like the gods said that everybody deserves to be buried and that everybody deserves a funeral, but he literally went against the gods, so of course they're going to be mad at him.
Right? You don't question the gods, right? That's a lesson to be learned. Couple of you in here are in the other class, 230. Is it you, Miss Shayla, who's in 230, English 230? Somebody in here is. In that class, we just read the Iliad, and the Iliad is, of course, the great story about the Trojan War. Achilles, throughout the Iliad, is this really prideful, stubborn character. But his character arc is eventually he loses his pride. Eventually he listens to the gods. So he kills the Trojan hero, Hector. He's mad because Hector kills his best friend. So he murders Hector. Achilles is pretty much invincible, right? He can't die. Except for the story, as the story goes, his Achilles healed. But the Iliad, what happens at the end of it, he actually listens. Right? He gets over his pride and he listens to the gods. And that's a moment of humility that he has at the end. This play is completely different. Right? Cleon never gets that moment of humility. It takes the gods having to really smack him in the face for him to become humble. Even then, you wonder, was he really that humble? Right? It took this drastic of an action to get him there. Let's not forget that he's also a turd to his son, right? Like he tells his son that he can't marry his love anymore, right? He decrees that as well. Josh, you got anything what's your thoughts on this one?
I will say that I liked it. It didn't draw, as pointed out earlier, it didn't draw me as in as Oedipus did. But I do like how you pointed out that Aristotle's classical work on a tragedy was that the person in the tragedy had to be someone who was basically a good guy. Well, I like how in this one, the person who gets afflicted in the tragedy is not really a good guy. Like he's just an almost purely evil guy.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if Aristotle would have commented on this one. That's a whole history lesson in itself. Like, why do we have this writing from Aristotle? Why don't we have other writings? Like, we know that he also wrote about comedy. He even said, if you read this bit of the book, he's like, later in the book, I'll talk about comedy. Well, that didn't, whatever he wrote about comedy didn't reach us thousands of years later. It's lost somewhere in history. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories about that. Just to give you this is relevant to what we're talking about. Like, how do we still have Oedipus? How do we still have Antigone? How do we still have the Iliad? How did all this stuff reach us throughout thousands of years? Well, during the Greek and Roman periods, they had these really big libraries. Back then, you had to kind of copy a book down by hand. There wasn't copy machines, obviously, so you had to write a whole book down by hand. So that took time. So most of the great books were stored in libraries. Well, like one of the biggest libraries in the ancient world, the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, burnt to the ground. So think about all the knowledge in there that was lost, all these ancient books that we could have had, or maybe the only copy of the book in the world was in that library. But how does stuff reach us this far down? This is something we owe to the Roman Catholic Church as well as Islam. Okay, both the Roman Catholic Church and Islam preserved a lot of these old texts throughout the centuries, especially during those Middle Ages centuries. Well, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff going on, a whole lot of literature being written. Oftentimes what these monks would do is they would just spend all their day, like they would go to mass, and then they would spend the rest of their days copying down books. Like that was pretty much how a lot of these monks lived. So the reason why this stuff has reached us is because the church preserved it. But there's lots of debate, like how much knowledge does the church still have from the ancient period that they don't want us to know about, right? Maybe there's a bunch of knowledge, maybe there's a bunch of lost books from Aristotle or something somewhere deep down in the Vatican's archives, right? We'll never know because the Vatican won't release them because maybe they are contradictory to the faith. You guys see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of conspiracy about maybe there is a lot of Greek Roman stuff, but they just never let us in on it. But at the same time, we wouldn't have what we have if it wasn't for them. Right? So it's a double-edged sword. But we also owe Islam. Early Islam was actually really tolerant of other faiths. Like people in Islamic countries could practice Christianity, but they had to pay a tax to do so. Like they had to pay heavy. But a lot of the earliest forms of Islam, the Christians weren't persecuted. Of course, later the persecution started. Right? Christians are still being persecuted in many Islamic countries today. But like Syria, for instance. But we owe them too for preserving a lot of this old knowledge. So fun fact I figured I'd throw in. So Aristotle maybe wrote about comedy. We'll never know what he said. He might have written about Antigone. We never know what he said. So it's a fun thing to think about. if I had the level of critique, I would say I think Antigone's better than Oedipus in one aspect. And that aspect would be the dialogue. Like I think the dialogue in this play is a lot stronger than in Oedipus. Oedipus was mostly these really big long speeches. This play's got a lot of banter back and forth between characters. I see you're nodding, Michaela. You pretty much agree with me here.
Yeah, I couldn't stand reading the super huge monologues. It bores me.
And this one keeps your attention, just even scrolling through the pages. Like you can see how the dialogue, like there's more one line back and forth, one line back and forth. There's a lot more dialogue in this one. You will not like Agamemnon next week, probably, because that whole play is giant monologue after giant monologue. So that's but again, Aeschylus was before Sophocles, so a lot of those innovations hadn't happened yet. But yeah, that brace yourself, long dialogue after long dialogue for that one. Savannah's got a difficult task ahead. That's one of the harder plays. It's a good one. It's a harder one to read.
Now you tell me.
Mhm. Yeah, that play's got a lot of interesting history of what happened before the play even starts. That's something I should probably instruct you on, Savannah, before you do your presentation. A lot of mythology behind how it even starts. But yeah, that's a classic question. How far does the government go before we have to start ignoring the government? Right? That's something that's been asked all throughout history. Right? When do we throw out the government when the government becomes too immoral? And when it comes to death, that's one of the most sacred things we got. Right? So even today, we all go to funerals. So whenever you deny someone of that, I think it was Savannah. I think it was you, or it was either you or Kira. One of you guys said earlier that part of the reason why the funeral is important is that's how the soul leaves the earth in the Greek mythology. Like the soul.
Yeah, it's how you travel down to Hades with the rest of the forbidden souls.
Yeah, you're kind of suspended on earth before that funeral. So that's not really how Christians think, right? If you're dead, you go to heaven or hell or purgatory if you're Catholic, right? But yeah, here your soul's kind of suspended in this like limbo state. So that's another reason why Creon's being such a bad guy, right? He's literally denying the afterlife to the souls he's wanting to rot. Yeah, I think that was that wasn't as long as our discussion on Oedipus. I feel like we got the gist of the play. So so that was a really good class, guys. Let me make sure I get down everybody who's here. It looks like our attendance is a little down compared to last week. I don't know if people are dropping. They read all this stuff about marrying your mother, killing your father, right? They're like, I'm out of here. So good way to chase them off. All right, less grading for me. So Faith, Josh, Lily, Lily, Shayla,
Here.
gotcha, Lily, Shayla, Josh, Daryl, and Kira. So yeah, we're missing 3 people. Yeah, I will look forward to next week. Agamemnon, it's a good read, but it's a tough read. Faith, if you struggle with Antigone, you really have to push through on Agamemnon. But Medea, on the other hand, that one is a really wild, interesting play. That's the one about the mother, about the scorned mother who murders her children, right, to spite her husband. So yeah, we'll definitely have a good conversation about both. But I know you guys will be ready to talk about that one because it's a really controversial play. It's still to this day it's banned literature thousands of years later because it's such a hard. That's a hard thing, murdering your children, right? That's as taboo as it gets. So we're going to be discussing child murder next class. So again, if I haven't chased you off yet, right, you might want to think about it, right? But I think you guys are good to go. You're not going to run off. All right, guys. I enjoyed it. Great class. One more thing before we depart. I want to share real quick my screen on our Brightspace page. Let me scroll back to our class. Remember that part of your grade that's doing some writing workshops. So I'm going to give you one a week, a writing workshop to do on here. So if you click content, I have a tab called grammar workshops. The first one is on combining sentences and rules about point of view. I'm trying to give you guys a little bit of English instruction here and there, just frankly because I don't know how much you've had. So I've got a nice little PowerPoint here about combining sentences. I have a video about it. I have another little video about point of view, like when is it okay to use first person point of view? When is it okay to use second person? The answer to that's never, okay? And when is it okay to use third? So I give you some pretty common errors. Especially with this one, combining sentences, this lesson is on the error that I see most often in student writing. So it'll feel like English 101 again when you take these, but it'll be a good refresher. And then I had a little quiz up on it. Now these will be due before our next class, next Wednesday. So take that quiz sometime between now and then. Like I said, I'm just going to give you a little one of these almost every week, just to kind of spruce up, maybe spruce up your knowledge, sharpen up your writing a little bit. So in this class, it's not a writing class. We're not going to spend too much time, but I do find it important to spend a little bit of time. Okay. Even if it's stuff you already know, it's a good refresher. So that's where you find that. You can go take that anytime you want over the next week. And I'll upload our recording for tonight on here, either tonight or tomorrow. And I'm also going to update the schedule. I'm going to update the schedule where it says on the schedule what we're reading every week. That way you don't have to keep consulting the syllabus. Okay. Next week, Agamemnon, Medea. Any last minute questions before we depart? All right, guys, take care. Have a good evening. I'll see you guys again next week.
See you next week. Thanks for the class.
See you, Josh.